The mansion sat at the end of a long lane like a secret the city tried not to remember. At night its windows shone like watchful eyes. Inside, chandeliers breathed gold onto marble floors and the staircases curved like questions. The millionaire moved through that house like he owned every room and every regret, but he did not own everything. There were corners he never noticed and people who saw him more clearly than his own family did. She had been cleaning the same grand staircase for 3 years. Her hands knew the grain of the banisters, the pattern of every marble vein. She wore a uniform the color of midnight and the patience of someone who had learned to survive without being seen. People called her the maid, the help, the woman at the back of the room. She carried a small box of photographs in her locker. A nephew smiling with missing teeth, a mother who once cooked for 10 and made it seem like a feast, a faded certificate from a night class she had taken between shifts. Those pictures were the quiet proof that she belonged to a life outside the mansion. He was the kind of man who believed money could buy absolution. He believed it could buy loyalty, silence, appearances. His name was whispered at board meetings, in courtrooms, and in the private clubs where men drank whiskey and traded secrets like currency. He treated people like props. Polite when useful, invisible when not. He had once given her a summer off when her nephew fell sick. She had never forgotten that, though she rarely said it out loud. The wife was a different person. Her dresses were expensive enough to have their own invoices. Her smile had the practiced ease of someone who spent more time in the mirror than in conversation. She had married him for the world he offered and had not learned to live inside it. She had learned to control it. The house reflected that control: buttons, alarms, art that said status louder than affection. But control can harden into hunger. She wanted something the house could not fill: freedom from a life she considered a gilded cell, and a way to keep all of it without him. The plan was not sudden. It was a slow, careful thing, whispered into champagne glasses and folded into receipts. She had met a man at a gallery, someone with less restraint and more appetite for risk. They sat in the conservatory, let the sound of the city dim, and shaped a future where he would be gone and she would be the widow with the key to everything. She imagined the headlines: tragic accident, estate settled, new charity launched in his memory. She practiced grief and then practiced relief. On a Tuesday evening, the maid was finishing the china in the service wing when she heard voices above. She should have kept going. She had learned the value of not listening. But there was something about the tone, sharp, casual as a knife being sharpened, that pulled her toward the stair. She paused at the top, hidden by the velvet curtain the wife used to hide drafts. The corridor smelled of roses and a sweetness no one could eat. "There's insurance," the wife said, voice low but fierce enough that silence leaned in. "It will look like an accident." The balcony, one careless step, the railing. "You're sure?" the other man asked. He sounded like someone who had practiced danger until it felt ordinary. "Yes. He walks there every night," she answered. "He loves to stand looking at the city. He'll go there after dinner. It's perfect." Time stitched itself into a small, precise moment. Her hands tightened around the porcelain she held. The photographs in her locker flashed behind her eyes like a call. She thought of guilty men at hospital beds, of funerals where she had watched servants fold their grief and the wealthy collect sympathy like coins. She thought of the nephew, of the night class, of the small home she was saving up for. 1,000 small reasons that would be lost if he died, and one enormous reason she could not accept: someone plotting murder and thinking the world would simply look away. She slipped away from the curtain, heart hammering, mind unexpectedly sharp. She did something neither the wife nor the man who owed her silence expected. She became impossible. First she gathered evidence because the world trusted paper more than a woman's word. She had a phone, old and paid for in cash. The recordings she made were crude, whispered phrases captured in the hush of a corridor, the voice steady and horrified as she held the device beneath a hat. She recorded names, dates, details: the balcony, the night, the plan. She took pictures of the messages the wife left on a private account, screenshots of a flippant text that imagined the headline. She kept everything in a small locked box beneath the third floorboard in the laundry room where the house's inventory list hid. Then she moved. She knew the house better than anyone. She knew the route the millionaire took to his study, the key that stuck in the lock, the squeak in the third stair. She learned the schedule of the security team, who came at dawn to check the generators, who fell asleep during the second watch. She started leaving tiny visible traces of her knowing: a napkin with a tea stain left in the conservatory where the wife had been sitting, a book misplaced on the nightstand. The wife noticed the disturbances and called the house manager, but those who manage wealth are rarely invested in the lives around it. They were quick to blame fatigue, to blame grief. Her next move was audacious. She slipped a letter into the millionaire's briefcase. It was a simple envelope, the kind a child might send and a lawyer might ignore, but inside she wrote without flourishes. Listen. There is a plan to make you disappear. If you don't believe me, check your balcony at night. If you don't believe me, look at her messages. The letter was not a confession or accusation. It was a wake-up call, not to the police but to the man whose life she feared losing. He found the letter after midnight, hands steady from years of late nights. His face was a map of patience and surprises. He had not expected this. His first instinct was anger. He ordered inquiries, he questioned staff, he checked cameras. He was a man who believed cameras were a substitute for truth. The cameras showed nothing. No one expected a plan said in whispers heard only by a woman at the top of the stairs. The evidence was thin, and the people who should have believed him found it as credible as a rumor. So the maid did what a single pair of hands could do. She became a strategist with the humility of someone who had practiced silence long enough to know how to use it. She approached his lawyer with the proof she had gathered, but not in the formal way the wealthy expect. She arrived at the firm with a delivery box of pastries and a folded note explaining everything, asking for just an hour. She told the lawyer the story in plain language, gave him copies of the screenshots, the recordings, the letter. She placed the box of pastries on the table as if she had wandered in by chance, and the lawyer, taking a cinnamon roll, read like a man whose perception had been politely sleeping. "You're brave," he said, the word soft because no one expected bravery from a maid. "Bravery is what happens when fear has nowhere else to go," she replied. The lawyer moved faster than she had hoped. He could, in a day, set a chain of legal protections, change locks, produce a restraining order, but she needed immediate action. The balcony was scheduled to host the wife's routine late-night walk that very night. They decided on a trap that used the wife's own assumption against her. The millionaire would not be killed tonight because tonight would be the night she tried to confirm the method. They would stage a scene that showed she was the one in danger if she continued. The lawyer set up a listening post under the guise of an estate audit. Security doubled the patrols without telling the wife. Cameras were adjusted, not to spy, but to record what unworried criminals say when they think the room is empty. The wife arrived in the comfortable arrogance of someone used to being believed. She walked the balcony expecting to find the railing as reliable as her illusions. The man she had conspired with waited in the shadows because men like him prefer arrangements with witnesses they can pay to forget. He expected dollars and silence, he did not expect the glare of evidence and law. They argued, and the cameras caught the words the maid had only before managed to whisper into a phone. The husband watched from a safe distance, furious and betrayed, but also stunned into a kind of clarity. He had always believed himself immune to the machinations of his own household because he measured power by profit. The footage showed more than intent. It showed greed, cruelty, the language of people who think other lives are expendable. When the confrontation erupted into threats, the wife moved like someone used to making the first cut. She reached for the railing, ready to transform bravado into tragedy. That is when the house's security, already tipped off, intervened. Hands that had polished silver for years did not shake when they needed to act. The man with the gallery smile found himself speaking to uniforms and microphones. The wife found herself in the middle of a spiral she had not anticipated. Footage, witnesses, the lawyer with all the evidence catalogued like a ledger of damning intent. It could have ended there in a kind of slow justice. Arrests, trial, whispered disgrace. But the maid did something larger. She took the revelation public in a way a secret house could not contain. She sat with reporters on the mansion's marble steps. No fanfare, no plea for recognition, just facts placed like stones. She spoke about the recordings, the messages, about the decision she had to make at the top of a stair. She told a small, hard truth. People assume the powerless will always be silent. She refused silence because she had a life to protect. The city listened. The media loved a story with a twist, the servant who saved the master. It called her a hero, a watchdog, a brave woman. It gave her a face beyond the kitchen. Some hailed her, others tried the old dismissals. She was paid to be there, it was gossip, how could she know? She let them speak because the facts were not opinions. The lawyer delivered the paperwork that made the wife's assets inaccessible pending investigation. The gallery man vanished into legal limbo and the wife faced charges of conspiracy and attempted murder. But endings are rarely clean. Headlines brought the mansion to its knees in public, but inside private fissures ran deep. The millionaire, who had been saved by the very person he rarely rewarded with more than a nod, found himself confronting his own life. He could have let the law handle everything and withdrawn to a life of resentment and anger. Instead, something flickered, maybe gratitude, maybe shame, maybe the recognition that survival had landed in hands he had dismissed. He offered the maid what she had never asked for: a full-time legal guardian for her nephew, paid tuition for classes, and a small house with a blue door she had once said she wanted. He offered an apology that sounded like a business transaction but carried the weight of someone learning a new currency: respect. She accepted certain things and refused others. She would not accept a job promotion that meant leaving the life she wanted. She would not accept public adulation for doing what any decent human would do.